Hi, my name is Kelly Blewett, and I am the Writing Program Director here at Indiana University East. I am delighted to welcome you to the 2021 Celebration of Student Writing. I want to begin by thanking the many people who helped make this event possible, including my co-editors on the Celebration of Student Writing press book, Christy Markham and Tanya Perkins. Thanks also to the IU East marketing folks who offered talents in design, promotion, and technical support. I also thank the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, which awarded a grant to support these efforts, and particularly Dean Darren Snyder, who is with us today and has been a huge supporter of this event since the beginning. We are here to celebrate student writing, and to do that, we want to look at some student writing. So I'm excited to share a link to the Celebration of Student Writing 2021 press book, which features the work of over 75 students. You can see the cover of the press book here beside me. In this online book, you will find writing from lots of students, from first-year students working in general education courses to graduate students pursuing specialized degrees. You will find many types of writing as well, including poetry, fiction, reflection, pedagogy, research papers, magazine articles, and even a piano composition. At IU East, we are surrounded by writers, and it is a pleasure to celebrate. I thank faculty for helping us find all of this excellent student work. In January of this year, we invited teachers to tell us about students' writing that they wanted to publicly acknowledge, and they responded enthusiastically. In fact, 25 faculty took time to individually nominate students for inclusion in this collection. Faculty from mathematics, biology, English, criminal justice, education, communication, world languages, marketing, nursing, psychology, and fine arts. Writing is relevant in all of these spaces. As you read the introductions to student writing in this book, you will see the words that faculty nominators use to describe the writing of their students. Words like unique and creative, well-researched, super cool, excellent, and just a joy to read. These pages make visible the appreciation and affirmation that is often communicated in private spaces, like the margins of a paper or an electronic gradebook. It is a pleasure to make these words public and to celebrate the connections between teachers and students. We also celebrate the writing by nursing students enrolled in L230. 12 student groups prepared video presentations specifically for this collection. Their projects explore topics that reflect our current health crisis, including the shortage of nurses, nurse burnout and fatigue, and the lasting impact of COVID-19 on nurses. I thank Professor Carolyn Judd for creating space for her students to take part in this event. Finally, we celebrate the opportunity to bring thoughtful writers to campus and have conversations about writing that matter. With that in mind, I am going to introduce you to our keynote, Frederick Joseph. As you listen to Fred's keynote, I encourage you to post responses and questions in the Facebook Live chat. We will have an opportunity to engage Fred in a Q&A after his keynote, and included in that Q&A will be 4 IU East students who are here on Zoom with us now, and they will also share their chapters in the Celebration Press book. So without further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce Frederick Joseph, and I'm going to offer a quick introduction here. Fred is the author of The Black Friend, On Being a Better White Person, a book that hit the New York Times bestseller list in the young adult category almost as soon as it was published. He is an activist and a philanthropist with over 10 years of marketing experience. And this is pretty amazing. He is the sole creator of the largest GoFundMe campaign in history, the Black Panther Challenge, which ultimately generated $43 million in earned advertising and media for Disney and allowed more than 75,000 children worldwide to see Black Panther for free. He is also the creator of the largest individual COVID-19 support effort, the Rent Relief campaign, which has raised over $2 million. Fred is included on the Forbes list of 30 influential people under 30 and was honored as the 2018 Comic-Con Humanitarian of the Year. In addition to telling his own story with humor and poignancy and purpose, Fred writes about marketing and culture and politics for the Huffington Post and USA Today, among others. Please join me in welcoming Frederick Joseph to Indiana University East.
Thank you for having me, Kelly, and thank you to the entire faculty and student body of Indiana University East. I want to say first and foremost, you'll have to excuse my writing beard right now. I'm in the process of working on my two new works. And, as I've been working on these two new projects, I got the chance to take some time with the ebook that was put out of the student writing that will be focused on today. And as I was reading it, I was reminded of something that my grandmother told me years and years ago. She said, if no one's telling the story, then you tell it. And I think that the work that I've read here embodies that truly. From everything from poetry to studies on social media, this book embodies the truest essence of what we need to do as writers. The people who are, in my opinion, the gatekeepers to history and the voice of those who might be voiceless or marginalized. And I don't think that there's ever been potentially a more important moment for writers than right now. We're in a moment of confusion for many. We're in a moment of pain. We're in a moment of suffering, quite frankly. And this is a moment that for many has had a through line since the inception of our country and long before. And that moment and these moments, again, will be told, changed, fixed, course corrected by the storytellers. It's something that we saw during the civil rights movement and the works of Angela Davis, the works of Huey P. Newton, the films that came out about the movement. It's something that we also see right now when we put on the nightly news, and it reminds us that Black lives do matter. When we look at social media and the content creators remind us to stop Asian hate. All of this storytelling, all of this work that's being done is going to change the future. And again, in my deepest opinion, I feel as though that work is being done in its fullest and most beautiful form at Indiana University East. When I was young, I didn't know that I was going to be an author, quite frankly. I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that my grandmother had always wanted to be a published author. She worked tirelessly honing her craft and trying to find some agency to rep her, trying to find some publishing house to put her out to the world. And it wasn't in the cards for a Black woman, especially in the 50s, 60s, frankly, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and not in the cards for many Black women today either. So, eventually I said to myself, I wanted to take up that mantle and tell the stories that she told me, quite frankly, tell the stories of all of the Black people and the Black women and those who have been marginalized and left ultimately voiceless in some capacity. I wanted to tell those stories. And with my debut work, that's what I've aimed to do. And I think that if we're not endeavoring to give voice to others, if we're not endeavoring to stand on the shoulders of the giants who came before us, whether the world knows about those giants or not, then what are we endeavoring to, right? What are we actually working towards? And this has been my North Star in my writing, always thinking about the work that should have come out from my grandmother and the work that should come out from so many other Black women, and whether my work can help create some of that access, whether my words can help create a platform. And again, I see so much of that in today's writers. I see so much of that in all of you. One of the things that I was most interested in actually was one of the pieces that I read about social media and just I forget the name of the piece, but it was a phenomenal research paper on the impact of social media on our mental health. And the reason why that was so interesting to me is because it was so beautifully poetic in that it assessed not only where we are, but where we have been and where we're going. And that ultimately can save lives, right? And another body of work that comes to mind is this piece on consciousness. Who are we? What are we? What are we conscious of? What are we not conscious of? And what's the importance of our consciousness? All of these works, all of this brilliance that's coming out is of the utmost importance, because if we don't work towards getting those stories out, if we don't work towards making our words known, making our hearts known, making our imagination sing, then who will, quite frankly? One of my favorite authors, and actually probably my favorite author and the person who most influences me, is James Baldwin. And the reason why James Baldwin is one of my favorite authors is because James Baldwin did something that I think that all of us need to work towards at all times. He was honest. He was honest about the world around him. He was honest about the things he saw. He was honest about the things that hurt him. He was honest about who he was and who he wasn't. And I think that that's so important because so many of us are trying to be something right now, but many of us aren't being honest. And I see so much honest writing, so much honest narrative in the work happening right here, right? Right in this digital room, if you would, with these young writers, the writers of tomorrow, my peers, my colleagues. And again, it's this honesty that alters the path of humanity, right? If there's no James Baldwin, there's no me. If there's no James Baldwin, there is no Ta-Nehisi Coates. There is no Ibram X. Kendi. There is no um, Nick Stone and all these prolific writers. Again, it's the honesty. And it makes me think of another phenomenal writer who I grew up on, who means so much to me, and that's Angela Davis. Angela Davis, in essence, she embodied something more than even honesty. Angela Davis embodied unapologeticness, and that's something else that I urge, and again I see in the writing here. Not only to be yourself in an honest way and be honest with the world about it, but unapologeticness leads into doing things, saying things, and feeling things that ultimately you love, right? You love who you are. You love the skin that you're in. You're not just honest about it, but you're in love with it. Angela Davis was in love with being a woman. Angela Davis was in love with being Black. Angela Davis was in love with being a Black woman, and it spoke through her words. It spoke through her work. And I think that that's the best writing that there is. It's not about necessarily being the most technical writer. It's not about being the most poetic in your prose. It's about being honest and unapologetic. It's about telling your story. It's about telling the story of the people like my grandmother. So it's about telling the stories of the people like your parents. It's about telling the stories of the people in the marches. It's about telling the stories of the people who are like you, who are like me. And ultimately, in doing so, we make the world see. Now, the world isn't the world that James Baldwin or Angela Davis would want yet, but we're getting there, right? We're getting there. And we wouldn't be getting there, we wouldn't be heading there if not for the ways in which their words, their honesty, their unapologeticness open the minds of you and me. So I guess that leads me back to my original point of why this work meant so much when I was reading it. There's a beautiful imagination in youth, right? There's a beautiful what if that comes with youth. And I want you all to hold on to that. That's something that I'm trying to hold on to right now as I grow out my unkept beard and work on the projects I'm working on now. The idea, right? What if I did write this? What if I did tell this story? What if I did do it unapologetically? What if I was honest? What if I was straightforward? What if? The what if gives us all the possibilities of that youthful imagination, right? And I think that oftentimes in many writers and storytellers, we lose that what if. There's been moments that I've lost it in the project that I'm working on right now. I reminded myself recently in reading these projects to ask myself, what if? What if I was to be more daring? What if I was to be more real, right? Instead of the figments of imagination that oftentimes writers are relegated to in the minds of readers. We have to remember that we're the people who dictate oftentimes what the readers imagine. We dictate what the readers believe in. We dictate what the readers want to see, what the readers want to do, how the readers want to make change. So when you're asking yourself, what if, when you're being that youthful, imaginative self, try to remember to hold on to that, right? Try to never let that go. I think it is the almost the arrogance of youth that the world will be whatever they want it to be that actually ends up changing the world. When I was writing The Black Friend, I held on to that what if, and I held on to the honesty of James Baldwin, and I held on to the unapologeticness of Angela Davis to create a world, to create a narrative in my book that spoke to people about something that doesn't exist yet, right? I think many people think that I was writing just about the world I had seen and the world I had dealt with. But it's more than that. It's absolutely more than that. And it has to always be more than that. I was writing from a place of the world that I want to see, the place of the world that I thought existed when I was 8 years old, the world that doesn't exist right now, right? A world that doesn't exist right now. Which, it's interesting. One of the pieces that I read actually was a poem, and I forget the name of it right now, and I hope that all of you will read the ebook if you haven't read it yet. But it was this beautiful poem, all in Spanish, and again, I forget the name, but I believe it was the only poem in the book that was in Spanish. And I took the entire poem and I put it into Google Translate because my Spanish is not great to say the least. And as I was reading this, I thought to myself, not only is this beautiful, but this hits all my marks of what if, honesty, and unapologeticness. Because I'm not sure that a poem in all Spanish in an American university would have necessarily existed when I was a child. I'm not sure if it would have existed when my grandmother was a child. It wouldn't have existed probably when my grandmother was trying to get published, right? And I was so surprised and happy to see it published in a world where people are demonizing people who speak that same language, right? It was the beauty of the author, the writer of that poem saying, what if I write this entire poem in Spanish? What if I was to tell the world I'm going to speak my language, right? If I was going to force you to have to learn and love and listen in the way that I do, because that's my honesty, that's my unapologeticness. It's really a powerful, powerful thing. And it all depends, honestly, on what you're writing often, right? A poem is not necessarily received in the same way that marketing copy is received. It's not necessarily received in the same way, that a speech is received, so on and so forth. But they can all hit the same marks. And that's, again, what I just urge everyone to think about as they're writing, as they're creating. I've lost it many times. And I think in many ways, rereading this book, I think I read it 2 times, 2.5. Rereading the book helped me remember that, which helped me go back and crafting my narratives, right? Which helped me go back and crafting my imagination. I was able to pull from somewhere that all of you reminded me to pull from. There was something that author Nick Stone said to my fiance and I recently. We were interviewing her. We were interviewing her for a book that we're working on right now. It's one of the two books that I have in the works, and she was talking about being a YA author, and this is the importance of distinction between the difference in what you're writing. She was saying that as a YA author, she always has to end with hope, right? She wants the reader to walk away with hope because her reading audience is primarily young people. And she said, we can talk about the prison industrial complex, we can talk about police brutality, we can talk about many of these things, but ultimately, I want you to leave with something that speaks to something greater, right? Speaks to that world that I was talking about before in terms of a world that we can imagine, a world that doesn't exist necessarily yet. But I disagree on one point though. I don't think that it's just a matter of writing for a YA audience. I think that that hope should exist in all of our works, right? If we're not creating to inspire, then why are we creating, right? If Angela Davis wasn't creating to tell her story and in turn help free other Black women, then why write it, right? Her story was frankly bigger than her. James Baldwin's stories are frankly bigger than him. And I think that they knew that. The best works are always bigger than us. So I think that that's another important aspect of writing is having that hope in your words. And it doesn't have to be explicit, right? It doesn't have to be explicit at all. I think that the best works, it shines through without saying that you're hopeful necessarily. But the fact that you were here to put your story down, the agency that you work for, the fact that you were here to write this poem in a language that oftentimes has been forbidden in most spaces that we occupy now, it's important that those things embody hope. And I think as I have the floor and I go through all the things that I wrote down, Sean, beforehand. One of the other really important things that I wanted to speak to is the power of taking your time, right? I think that we live in a society now where everything is rushed. Everything is happening at the speed of light. Twitter makes it impossible to get a nuanced opinion about anything. Instagram makes it impossible for us to see past what's to us in a 4x4 square, which is why I think it's so important for us to take the time when crafting, take the time when creating, because ultimately that's what gives us our best work, right? I've been working on for, I would say, about 20 years, right? Since I was a child, I've been working on one of my books that I intend on coming out with one day since I was an absolute child, and it's going to be the best thing that I've ever written. It's going to be the best thing I've ever worked on because of the fact that I'm able to not only just take time, but evolve, right? Time gives us the opportunity to evolve in our work. Time gives us the opportunity to learn. Time gives us the opportunity to change. And so often I think that we're rushing, right? Like, especially in publishing, when publishing is another industry in which, writers are forced to rush constantly. You sign a deal and they want the book 4 hours later, it feels like. But that time is essential. That time is crucial. So if you can, take your time. Work. Wash over you, walk away, come back, and let it wash over you again. Really, why I reread the ebook for this event multiple times, because the first time I'm sitting, the second time I'm digesting, and then coming back and then I'm filling myself up, right? I'm fully filling myself up with what each of you is trying to tell yourself, what each of you is trying to say that you didn't even know that you might have been trying to say. That time was important. It's important for writers, it's important for writers. And and the last 2 points that I'll touch upon that I think are deeply important. So we have time, we have honesty, we have unapologeticness, and we have what if. And the last 2 points or pillars, I think, in writing are love, right? One of them is love. Love is at the root and just the actual center of everything I put out into the world. And I say pretty early on in my book that it actually hurts me in ways when people think that my work is meant to be divisive or meant to critique recklessly. It's the complete opposite. In my work, I try to give as much love as I can, as much love as been taught to me to give as possible, right? There is love in every sentence, there is love in every period, there's love in every exclamation point. Because if you have that, then your work inherently is all of the things that we named, right? Your work, if through the lens of love, is going to be unapologetic. Your work, if through the lens of love, is going to be honest. Your work, if through the lens of love, is going to meet the idea of what if, is going to touch upon the imagination, because love begs more, right? Love begs of us to do more. Love begs of us to be ourselves. Love begs of us to be honest and trustworthy and true. So if you can, at all times, think of those things when you're writing. Now, my last point on how to craft the narratives, if you would, that will ultimately change the world or change your world, is your name. This was something I've been thinking about since early last spring. Names, right? And by names, I mean literally your name, the name that's down on your work, the name that you answer to, the name that people call out when they want you to respond, the names that people look for when they want to see who you are. The reason why I want you to think about your name in your work is because I want you in your work not just to realize that your name is attached to it, but I want you to be as soft, sensitive, and caring with your work as your name. Right? You don't want your name besmirched by anything. You don't want to be called anything other than by your name. You want your name to be respected. You want your name to be taken care of, gently caressed, held like a babe. And that is exactly how you should treat anything you put into this world from a creative writing standpoint. Treat it like your name. Treat it like it's going to be sang from the mountaintops. Treat it like it's going to be the last thing in your eulogy or your obituary, rather. Treat your work like your name, in that it is what the love of your life thinks of when they wake up in the morning. Treat your work like your name when possible. So those are my pillars, and those are the things that I was actively thinking about when I was reading this work, is how many people I could tell were treating their work with the care that they were treating their name, how many people were being unapologetic, how many people were leading with love in their work, how many people were being honest, and how many people were asking themselves, what if, and having the imagination of youth that I hope that you all hold on to, and that your work has helped me to hold on to. And I thank all of you for reminding me to adhere to my own pillars that I so long ago told myself were going to influence all of my writing. So I guess all that to say thank you. Thank you again for reminding me, and I hope that you all continue to remind yourselves.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Fred. It is just really refreshing to hear you speak and to hear about how the reading that you did influenced your ideas about writing and just your exhortation to us to remain honest and your pillars are just really great things to think about. And there's a beautiful moment of serendipity that's about to sort of emerge because Angeli Luna, who wrote the piece in Spanish that you were referencing, is our first questioner. So we're going to have a chance to watch the two of you interact. And I just want to tell our audience on Facebook Live, there will be a link to Angeli's chapter that will appear in the chat. So go and check out what Fred is talking about. It is a wonderful thing. And I guess the only other point I would make is that Angeli is a senior double majoring in communication studies and Spanish, and also a soccer player. And with that, I'm going to stop my video and turn it over to Angeli. So Angeli is having some video. She's not going to show her video, but we're going to be able to hear her audio, I hope.
Hi, everyone. So hi, all. I'm honored to be here with you all. My name is Angeli Luna. I'm from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I'm a double major in communications and Spanish. Thanks to Professor Moneypenny for nominating me. My narrative, Amelia Luna, is written in Spanish, is set to showcase through the protagonist and family the lineage and the reality of the Puerto Rican identity and hardships as well. Similar to, and now citing, the Black friend, it's for those who want to do better, who want to be better. So Fred, it's an honor to meet you. My question for you is, what key moment or situation inspired you to really sit down and write The Black Friend?
Well, first and foremost, Angeli, it was, like I said, your poem, your work was just absolutely magnificent. You know, I wish that I could have completely read it in Spanish. I need to work on that. So I'll step my game up. But you know, even translating it over to English, it was absolutely amazing. Now, in terms of your question, what inspired me to, I guess, sit down and work on the book, you know, really does lean into the pillars that I was talking about. When I looked around at the world, I found that there was something missing, right? There was something missing in the narratives that were available. There was something missing in the storytelling that was being done. And I felt like that was the manifestations or the daily manifestations of the systems of racism and white supremacy, right? We often talk about white supremacy as if it just exists in these large words and concepts, right? Like the judicial system and exists in words like Jim Crow and slavery. But within those words are individuals, right? And their daily lives. So I felt it was important for me to write my unapologetic truth and lean into my honesty and even some of my love for the people around me in writing that book and hopefully helping enlighten people as to what some of the daily struggles are to not just be a Black or brown person in America, but specifically a Black or brown person through a various set of age ranges, right? I didn't want to just write about being an adult. I'm an adult who lives with privileges, and those privileges somewhat shield me at times. But that's why I leaned into the vulnerability and the scarcity of youth, quite frankly, right? And as I thought that that would be something that people would find most relatable and most touching to the heart.
It is definitely enlightening. Thank you.
I think our next student question, and I'm looking at my list here, is it Raheel? Are you going to go next?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rahil Najasabadi, and I'm a junior majoring in English, technical and professional writing. And here's my poem, Wedding Day, that was nominated by Dr. Brian Broder, that really focuses on the female narrative and a new protagonist that explores the conventional subjects that are usually explored from that perspective. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much, Frederick Joseph, for being here today. I'd like to ask you about how you overcame the emotional reactions during writing The Black Prince.
Yeah, I think that that's a great question, and also as I said before, there were so many works that embodied all my personal pillars and made me very happy to see. And I just love your work.
Thank you.
Your ability to poetically capture like a moment, especially just like, oh, this is so this. So, thank you for that. I actually just shared it with my fiance right before this. So,
Thank you.
you're a brilliant writer.
Thank you so
Now,
much.
in terms of um, in terms of how I've overcome kind of the emotional aspects or the stress somewhat, is that what we're asking to a certain extent,
Yes, the emotional
Raheel?
reactions during writing something as important as The
Gotcha.
Black Prince.
Gotcha. To be quite frank with you, I'm still navigating how to overcome them. If I'm being quite honest, because this is my debut book, I've never necessarily had a project in the world in such a wide scale way, right? I've worked on many things behind the scenes, and I had a fairly large platform before the book, but I think that when you put yourself into your work and you put your absolute truth into work, and then you find out how people are feeling about that work, it's something that no one can ever fully prepare for. And I don't even know if you should necessarily try to prepare for it or necessarily overcome it. I think that you have to exist with it, right? So that's what I try to do. I try to embody the fact that people both love it is both things happen and often at the exact time. That has given me a certain amount of reprieve, I suppose, from some of the harsher instances of emotional toll, knowing that while someone is going to potentially engage with me in sorry, I believe I just lost myself. Raheel, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Yes.
you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Verizon, I would not suggest it. Uh, that being said, I was saying that understanding that humanity, the human condition, society embodies both love and hate gives me a reprieve at times and gives me the ability to not necessarily overcome, but to understand, right? Where people's words don't necessarily sit inside of me as they once did. And I think that's actually a really important point that I hope that everyone on here understands is not everyone is going to love you or your work, right? That is just not the nature of mankind. It is up to you to love your work, right? And if you are being truthful and honest and loving and thinking about your name, then nothing else is going to ultimately matter, because you know that within that work that you put out to the world, it is you, right? It is you, and it will leave your hands and your minds and your lips as you, and it will sit inside of other people as you. And there's nothing more precious than that, regardless of how they may feel about it.
Thank you so much.
Kate, I think you're next up, I believe.
Yep, I also cannot start my video, but can you hear me? Oh,
I can hear you fine.
there we go. Now it works. Hi, my name is Kate, and I am an online student studying English with a focus in professional and technical writing. And my contribution to the press book was a National Geographic style article about the Mars One mission. And Fred, my question for you is, when I write, I often find that I sort of crystallize how I feel about a subject, or I discover different facets of how I feel about a subject through the act of writing. And I'm curious if you writing this book helped you to come to terms with any of your feelings around the topics discussed, or help you to discover new aspects of those topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I've obviously been crediting everyone for their work on here, but I was particularly interested in your work because, there's all these ways in which I don't write, right? So I'm always interested in people writing in ways that I would love to endeavor in, and I just think that you did a brilliant job. I was like, oh, this is phenomenal. I think everyone's writing was phenomenal, but I was particularly interested in people who have talents where I lack, quite frankly. So amazing. Now, in terms of the question, honestly, the entire work allowed me to come to terms with not just others, but myself. Right? Like I really it was a cathartic experience that allowed me to kind of reframe, reshape, and crystallize moments and people that I had, instead of trying to understand better, I ran away from, quite frankly, right? There were moments in the book that, in my early 30s, I hadn't been in those moments since I was 8 years old. It was, I consider the book sometimes almost like a journal to myself, as opposed to even something for everyone else, in that way. And I do think that, writing is a gift. I think all storytelling is a gift in that way, but I think writing in particular allows us this ability to sit with ourselves in this pensive way that gets us to a moment, if we do it right, and if we are honest with ourselves, if we are unapologetic and all those things, it gets us to a point where we're writing about the world that we know, even not about the world that we know, right? Like, you can be writing about something happening on Pluto and realize that you're coming to terms with something that your parents did to you. And that's the beautiful thing, right? As you're sitting there, you're drawing from a well that is filled with joy and trauma, good people and bad people. And I think that again leans into what I was saying before, about and all these things, that if you're doing all of that, you'll find in your process, regardless of, as I said, in your process, about all these different things, all these different subjects. So, I got that in a very overt way. Obviously, I'm talking about people who did direct damage to me, but I think in a non-overt way, I also got it about myself. I got it about my mother. I got it about my grandmother. so on and so forth. So, I do think that the best writing, just the act of writing gives us the ability to crystallize things that we otherwise may not have.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
This has been so good. And I just want to remind our Facebook audience and attendees that if you have questions to put in the chat, we will have a time at the end to forward them to Fred. And our last student participant is Aisha Carson.
So hi, it's very nice meeting you. My name is Aisha. I'm a senior here at IU East, and I'm majoring in psychology with a minor in criminal justice. The piece that I shared is from a class that I had last year on the subject of the legalization of marijuana. And my question to you is, I just know with going through topics like this, it can become very, very heavy. And sometimes you feel like you just kind of want to run away and stop. So I want to know, what are some activities and hobbies that you do that kind of help you renew or refresh your mind, that helps you, keep going so that you can write these things and these books to tackle this subject?
It's interesting. I'm still figuring that out. I'm still figuring out what the healing work looks like, right? I'm still trying to learn how to create spaces for myself to sustain. And I think specifically in the subject matter that I touch upon in my debut work, and the work and the subjects that you touched upon, you're pouring from a cup, right? And oftentimes you're pouring from a cup that's kind of half empty, right? You're talking about a heavy subject, and I don't want to assume this, but I believe that you're a Black woman, just based on our Zoom box there, and now you're telling me, yes, I'm right. That's not an easy task in of itself to be in society, right? So you're not just a woman, you are also Black, and you live at the intersection of writing, right? Like, so you're creating a narrative from this already marginalized space inherently. That's not easy, and I don't think that any of our work is easy. Even if I was to write about wizards and warlocks and Voldemort and Dumbledore and so on and so forth, the space that I'd have to come from is still that of a Black man, right? And a Black man in America, and that ultimately won't be the same space as, say, a J.K. Rowling. It just inherently would not be. So even in that, what does the healing look like to sustain the work? And for me, what I've been trying to do, honestly, is lean into music, right? I think that music not only builds me anew, I think music also lets me know that other people have been there, right? Like when I listen to something like Marvin Gaye, or someone rather like Marvin Gaye, it reminds me, oh, you're not alone, right? Like, other people have been tired, other people have been struggling, and there is joy in us being in community, right? Like, that's where I've been finding a lot of joy outside of music, is just simply being in community. Like, this space right here for me is healing, getting to tell Raheel and getting to tell Angelie and getting to tell Kate and you how amazing your work is, and I am a fan, is healing for me, right? It actually builds me up to want to go do other things, right? As opposed to just taking from myself, making it almost impossible to continue and sustain. So I guess all that to say, music and community have been where I've found my healing bubbles, if you would. And I would suggest that everyone on here find their healing bubbles, because regardless of what you're writing, you're still pouring out of your cup to do so. And if you're not pouring back into your cup, then you're not going to take the necessary time. You're not going to be as unapologetic. You're not going to be as honest. You're not going to lean into what if, and you're not going to actually love or embody love in your writing if you're not loving yourself.
I agree. I love music as well. Thank you.
Well, this has been a really great time to kind of have a little bit of conversation around a book. I mean, one of the things that that I like to think about is you feel like you're getting in touch with an author when you read, but there's a totally different experience whenever you get to see the author and hear their voice and ask questions and connect. So Tanya's been watching the Facebook chat for me. And I'm wondering, Tanya, do you have a question that I should pose from the chat, or can I be selfish and ask my own question? Okay, I get to be selfish. I would like to hear what you're working on now. And I know you mentioned you have 2 books that you're working on. And I'm curious, are they in the same kind of register as The Black Friend, or are you sort of throwing your voice in a different direction? And how did you figure out sort of that voice question in relation to your project and audience and aim is something that really interests me.
Yeah, you know, it's been interesting. I'm working on one book called Patriarchy Blues, which is my debut adult nonfiction with HarperCollins, and I'm working on co-authoring my next YA book with the publisher of The Black Friend, and that's called Better Than We Found It. Working backwards, Better Than We Found It is, for me, kind of touching upon the same points that I mentioned why I wrote The Black Friend. I felt as though, and my fiance felt as though there was a conversation, a love, an unapologeticness, and an honesty missing in the literature space as it relates to progressivism, right? Not just specifically anti-racism and things of that nature, but you know, there's a voice missing as it relates to ableism. There's a voice missing as it relates to gun safety and all these really important topics that are so important for young people to understand. And we feel as though we've developed a voice, a register that's relatable, right? And informative. You know, our goal is to, in that book, kind of like how I did in The Black Friend, be somewhat of an older brother, a cousin, an uncle, a friend, right? Someone who you would sit down with, and if you're young, play a video game, and if you're a bit older, maybe have a beer. But you know, that is actually a complete departure from my debut adult book, which is, as I mentioned before, Patriarchy Blues. Patriarchy Blues for me is probably the furthest I've ever pushed myself artistically. It as a writer, as a poet, you know, generally in all facets of how we leverage word to convey any type of message. You know, I feel as though, or I felt and feel as though there was a voice missing as it related to the manifestations of patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, misogynoir, so on and so forth, coming from a voice who is cisgender heterosexual to say, we are getting it wrong, right? We are getting it wrong. We are absolutely needing to grow and develop. And where is some of this starting? Right? Like, how is this happening? Why is this happening? So I'm exploring, you know, those ideas in this book, and, you know, and not just from an academic sense. As I said before, I'm pushing myself artistically because I do feel as though if you want to truly convey a message, it has to be something that people want to read. So I'm trying to do things, and those are the things I'm working on now, which have me looking like a grizzly bear. So.
Well, I can actually totally see both of those projects' origins in The Black Friend. One of my favorite parts in The Black Friend was when you talked to the director of Moonlight. Oh, am I
Yeah.
okay? Yeah. I just
Yeah.
thought that was like beautiful and
You want me to
vulnerable.
elaborate?
I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that you're right. I think that Patriarchy Blues, to a certain extent, is an extension of that moment in some ways. You know, for those who haven't read the book, you know, a quick kind of 50,000 foot of that moment. Terrell Alvin McCraney was the writer of the original play that influenced, and then he wrote with Barry Jenkins the film Moonlight. And when I saw Moonlight in theaters literally 10 times, you know, I was moved and changed by the work. And I had this false pretense and assumption that the work was created to teach a lesson and to help people grow. And people like me, right? Again, a cisgender heterosexual Black man who had never necessarily seen homosexuality portrayed in such a nuanced, beautiful, and relatable way for me. So I came into my interview and my conversation with him with those pretenses, and I was completely wrong, right? And that is, I think, not only when I learned assessing myself, but also when I had a conversation with myself about art not necessarily having to be for anyone but yourself, right? And I think that's something important for us to all know, learn as artists in any endeavor, any platform, any medium, is that you can just create for yourself, and that's okay, right? What people take from that, they will. They can take whatever they want, but you creating for yourself is sometimes the best creation that you can do. And in that, I was honest with my readers, saying that I was wrong, right? If I'm going to ask my readers to understand when they're wrong and understand how they might need to grow, then I'm going to offer that love, honesty, that unapologeticness, so on and so forth, in giving to you how I'm also wrong. We are both parts of the same hypocrisy, and calling it out is the only way that we make systemic change.
Yeah, it reminds me of that 6 rules for allies, and rule 5 is, you know, you got to be open to being checked, you know, and it's amazing to me how you embody that, but also call your readers to that higher standard. And yeah, I just wish you all the best as you work on that. And we did have a question from the chat. I don't know if you have a moment for a last one. It's a little tough, but when you look at the overall social political landscape, there are a lot of reasons to feel anger and frustration. So where do you personally find that sort of potential for optimism?
Well, I think that the potential for optimism is what I spoke to in the pillars. What if, right? It is the imagination of young people and kind of this arrogance of what the world should be and can be, that gives me optimism, right? I think that we are seeing a generation right now, especially unlike anything we've seen before, a generation that is not only determined, but a generation that is cause focused, a generation that is liberation focused, inclusive, so on and so forth. And that gives me hope. And again, I think that that's why I was so moved by this book of work done by Indiana University East, because it is it's a myriad of writers from a spectrum of backgrounds, creating and being unapologetic and true to themselves, right? Everyone is different, everyone feels different, but somehow they all work in unison perfectly. It's poetry in motion reading through the book, and I truly mean that. And I think that that's what we all strive for as a society, right? This book, you know, the conversations that I just had are with individual women, each brilliant in their own right, and somehow it works.
Mhm.
And it's in moments like that, it's in seeing these things, it's in looking at younger people, it's looking at my peers who are also looking at younger people, that gives me hope. You know, again, to the point that I made before, I try to have hope in my work, and I try to have hope in my spirit because of that.
Thank you for that. And I do think putting this project together has been a very hopeful endeavor for me, as I've seen, especially just the words of affirmation that flow throughout that document during this time of sort of isolation and feeling very alone. It's amazing to see those words and to see that work collected, and all of it, you know, generated in 2020, as we're in the midst of this time.
Yeah.
So with all of that in mind, thank you so much, Fred, for coming and keynoting and sharing a little bit about your book, which is just so beautiful, The Black Friend. And we just really appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone in the Facebook audience who was here to kind of receive this celebration of student writing. And to our students, Raheel, Kate, Anjali, and Aisha, thank you so much for participating today. And I just encourage everyone to go and check out the book, the 2021 Celebration of Student Writing. Click on that book and see the work, because it's a really exciting opportunity, and over 75 student voices are included. So thank you all for attending, and that'll conclude our 2021 Celebration of Student Writing.